Hello students, welcome to session 6 of electrochemistry. In this session, we'll be winding up the galvanic cells part and we'll be entering into the second part of this chapter, concept of electrolytic conductance. Before I say officially that the galvanic cells part is finished, we need to learn one additional concept which is not part of NCERT textbook but very much required for you for entrance examinations, that is concentration cells. Now, straight away I'll start with an example while I'll describe these cells using an example straight away. We will see. See, concentration cells are also galvanic cells. They are special type of galvanic cells. What is that speciality? Let us understand through this example. In the left half vessel, I have got copper metal dipped in copper sulfate solution. Okay. In the right half vessel, I have got copper dipped in copper sulfate solution. What am I saying? Did I confuse? Let us see. As usual, both solutions are connected, both metallic plates are connected by metallic wire and both solutions are connected by a salt bridge. Do you expect this cell to produce any voltage? If same species is connected with each other, what kind of potential gradient are you generating? Why would the potential be generated? The answer is the concentration of the solution in the left vessel may be 0.01 molar. I'll just call it C1 for the time being. The concentration of right vessel may be 0.1 molar. I'll call it C2 for the time being. Means please understand, it is a galvanic cell in which both the half cells are made up of same components. Both the half cells composition is same, but the concentration of the solutions taken is different. How does that generate voltage? It's very simple. I have got two substances with two solutions with different concentrations connected to each other. Now, they tend to equalize the concentration. Means the concentration of left half vessel is lower than the concentration in the right half vessel. Then concentration of right half vessel tries to increase itself. Concentration of left half vessel tries to decrease itself so that the potential will become equal. While they are trying to balance the voltages, while they are trying to balance the concentrations, the voltage will be generated. Why? If this half vessel has to increase the concentration of ions in this solution, then the metallic copper present in this solution has to, solid copper present in this solution has to lose electrons and become copper cations. Then only the concentration keeps increasing, right? Then, for the concentration of cations to decrease in this solution, the copper cations which have a concentration of, I will call it C2 molar, have to gain 2 electrons and then become copper solid. Now, you know very well, where there is loss of electrons, that means oxidation happening, you call it anode. Where there is gain of electrons, that is reduction happening, you call it cathode. Now you see, the copper solid is entering into solutions as aqueous copper ions, whereas already the existing concentration here is C1 molar. Then copper cations present in the right half vessel is gaining 2 electrons and becoming copper solid, where the concentration of ions is C2 molar. Now, if I try to get the net cell reaction here, what happens? copper solid gets cancelled. The 2 electrons on both sides get cancelled. As a result, you are left with copper cation with C2 concentration giving rise to copper cations with C1 concentration. That means the net cell reaction will be copper cations with C2 concentration becoming copper cations with C1 concentration, C1 molar. Because you have created a concentration gradient, in order to reduce the concentration gradient and the concentrations to become equal, this electrode undergoes oxidation and this electrode undergoes reduction, and hence there will be flow of electrons. Because there will be flow of electrons, voltage will be generated. That is how concentration cell functions. Now, most important part of this. So you understood the basics of concentration cell. Concentration cell is a special type of galvanic cell in which both the electrodes have the same composition but different concentration of solutions. Because of concentration gradient, in order to equalize the concentration, the electrode reactions occur and voltage is generated. Now, how do we determine the cell potential of such concentration cell? As usual, we will be applying Nernst equation only. How does Nernst equation help calculate the cell potential of such concentration cell? Let us observe that. See, hope you remember Nernst equation. E cell is equal to E naught cell plus 0.059 by n log of. I am taking plus here, you could even take minus. I have told you the difference. Log of concentration of reactants minus concentration of products is what we have understood if there is plus. If you take minus here, it becomes concentration of products divided by concentration of reactants. Right? Now, observe the net cell reaction you got here. C2 copper ions with C2 concentration becoming copper ions with C1 concentration is the net cell reaction. Right? That's why I can write E cell is equal to E naught cell plus 0.059 by, of course, in this example, we have got 2 electrons, but I am generally taking n because I am trying to give you general equation. Log of concentration of reactants by concentration of products. Now comes the question, what is E naught cell? You know E naught cell is standard cell potential is nothing but SRP value of cathode minus SRP value of anode. And SRP values are the values of any electrode when the concentration of the solution is 1 molar. That means SRP value of copper electrode is 0.34. So in this case, both cathode and anode are copper. So 0.34 minus 0.34, 0. Because E naught cell is 0, you can write the final expression. E naught cell is 0. Therefore, E cell is equal to 0.059 by n log. What is reactant here? A solution with C2 concentration. What is product here? A solution with C1 concentration. So, assuming anodic concentration is C1 molar and cathodic concentration C2 molar, because we have a habit of generally seeing things from left to right. I took anode C1. Please don't fixate to the symbols that we are using. Different books might use different symbols. Somebody may call this C2, this C1, whatever. Concept is important. So, if I call anodic concentration as C1 molar and cathodic concentration as C2 molar, then the Nernst equation for concentration cell says E cell is equal to 0.059 by n log C2 by C1, where C2 is the cathodic concentration, C1 is the anodic concentration. Now, let us understand, in this example, I was taking lower concentration at anode, higher concentration at cathode. Is it the same in general? What exactly should happen? Here I have justified on physical grounds that this concentration, cation concentration in this solution has to increase, cation concentration in this solution has to decrease. For cation concentration to increase, oxidation should occur here. For cation concentration to decrease, reduction should occur here. That means we have already understood that anode must possess lower concentration because oxidation has to occur. Cathode must possess higher concentration because reduction has to occur. Now I am going to give you mathematical justification using this equation. What is that mathematical justification? You know very well, for cell to function, the cell potential must be positive. You observe here, E cell is equal to 0.059 by n log C2 by C1. For this value to come positive, the log value must be more than 1. Because if the the C2 by C1 value must be more than 1, because C2 by C1, if it comes more than 1, log of a value more than 1 will be positive. So overall value comes positive. If the ratio C2 by C1 comes negative, then log of C2 by C1 comes less than 1. C2 by C1 comes less than 1, then log of any value less than 1 will be negative, hence E cell comes negative. E cell comes negative, the reaction is not spontaneous, cell doesn't function. So please understand, always the solution containing, there is no question of cell not functioning once you create the concentration gradient. My explanation here is, whenever you design a concentration cell, you must understand which direction the flow of electrons and which direction the current flows. That means which is anode, which is cathode. And always remember, the solution having higher concentration is cathode, higher concentration of cations is cathode, solution having lower concentration of cations is anode. That is the introduction and basic understanding of concentration cells. But we will not leave it abruptly here. We will take probably 2 more examples to understand it better for all the kinds of possible cases. Okay? So after understanding that concentration cell contains both electrodes with same composition but different concentrations, and the one having higher concentration of cations acts as cathode and the one having lower concentration of cations acts as anode. Now I have a little exercise for you to do along with me while pausing and playing this video. Okay. See, one concentration cell I have drawn here for you, where iron dipped in ferrous sulfate are the electrodes. C1 is 0.2 molar, C2 is 0.02 molar. Now, listen to this question, pause the video, answer it and come back. I want you to identify which is cathode and which is anode and mark the flow of electrons as well as flow of conventional current. Once you mark the electrodes, marking flow of electrons and conventional current is easy for you. Hope you have done that. Let me give you the answer. As I was just explaining, the electrode where concentration of cations, ferrous ions is lower, it tries to increase its concentration until it becomes equal to this. Similarly, electrode in which concentration of ferrous ions is higher, it tries to reduce its concentration until it becomes equal to this. Now, to reduce the concentration, the ions should undergo reduction to become metal. That's why ferrous ions will be undergoing reduction here. So this is going to be your cathode. Cathode has positive charge in the galvanic cell, we know. So I'm just marking the positive charge. Similarly, to increase its concentration, the iron metal has to lose electrons and enter into solution as ferrous ions so that concentration of cations increases. That's why this will be your anode. If you understood the logic, that's how. If you want to just remember it, the one with lower concentration is anode, the one with higher concentration of cations is cathode. That way, electrons will be flowing from this side to this side. Conventional current will be flowing from this side to this side. From anode to cathode, electrons always flow. Of course, I have not drawn this in a conventional way where anodic half cell was supposed to be on the left hand side. I have not followed the convention here. Example number 2. Both sides I have used hydrogen electrode. Hydrogen gas passed into a solution of HCl. Hydrogen gas passed into a solution of HCl. Again, the question to you is, which electrode will be cathode, which electrode will be anode, given that the left half vessel the concentration of solution C1 is 0.45 molar. The right half vessel concentration of solution C2 is 0.57 molar. Again, we are not spending much time on this. The one with lower concentration must be anode. The one with higher concentration must be cathode. So, to calculate cell potential also, you will be using, E cell is equal to 0.059 by, if you take 1, you will have to you need not take square for H plus. If you take 2, you have to take square for H plus, because you know how the reaction occurs. Or let me explain in detail. See, the electrode reaction in anode, that is in the left half vessel, will be hydrogen gas, say losing 2 electrons and becoming 2 H plus ions, where the concentration is C1. Cathodic reaction will be H plus ions from the solution gaining 2 electrons, H plus ions from the solution having a concentration of C2, gaining 2 electrons and becoming a hydrogen gas. Okay, now because I have taken 2 electrons here, I could write this reaction by taking half H2 giving rise to 1 H plus 1 electron also. Now to get the overall reaction, H2 gas gets cancelled, the 2 electrons get cancelled, so your reactant will be 2H plus concentration C2 giving rise to 2H plus concentration C1. So while writing Nernst equation here, I'll write this side. E cell is equal to 0.059 by, because you have represented 2 electrons, let me take 2 here, log of concentration of H plus, C2 square, because reactants divided by products, C2 square divided by C1 square. Please remember, if you take plus here, reactants by products. If you take minus here, products by reactants. Now C2 square by C1 square is nothing but C2 by C1. You can substitute accordingly and do it. So 0.059 by 2 log of, what was C2? 0.57 divided by C1 was 0.45 into 0.57 into 0.45. Simplify that, get your cell potential. That is how exactly the Nernst equation for hydrogen electrode for the given values can be calculated. Now, when it comes to gas electrodes, one more point we are missing out here. What is that? There is hydrogen gas passed also. See, concentrations of pure metals is taken equal to 1, but gases, of course, we show their partial pressure as their concentration. Now what if the concentrations C1 and C2 are equal? The concentrations C1 and C2 are equal, but the partial pressures P1 and P2, they are different. Means I generate a concentration cell containing gas electrodes like hydrogen by taking different partial pressures of gases while maintaining the same concentration of solutions. Let us work on how that Nernst equation is going to be and how that cell is going to function. Observe here. As usual, anode, if you see, let me call it P1, let me call it P2. So H2 gas with a partial pressure of P1 becoming 2H plus 2 electrons, and then 2H plus gaining 2 electrons, that will be cathodic reaction, giving rise to H2 gas with concentration P2. Now let us cancel 2H plus on both sides because concentration of H plus is equal, and cancel 2 electrons. Then reactant is going to be H2 gas with P1 concentration, P1 partial pressure, giving rise to H2 gas with P2 partial pressure. Now if you write Nernst equation for this, let me write the Nernst equation here. E cell is equal to 0.059 by 2, of course. This is reactant by product, I told you. So log of P1 divided by P2. Now you decide for this cell to be spontaneous, which should be larger, P1 or P2. Let us understand. See, we have plus here. Now, for the value to remain positive, this ratio has to be more than 1. If this ratio is more than 1, log of more than 1 will be positive, E cell will be positive, cell will function. Whereas if P1 by P2 comes less than 1, the value will be negative, E cell will come negative, cell does not function. Now for this ratio to be positive, P1 should be larger than P2. Now which one we assumed as P1? The one where oxidation is occurring. Observe here. The one where oxidation is occurring. The one where oxidation is occurring is which one? Anode. So please understand, in case of hydrogen electrode, if it is concentrations, no problem. Concentration of cations is larger, that will be cathode. Concentration of cations is smaller, that will be anode. Whereas if concentrations are given constant and partial pressures are different on both sides, then the one having larger partial pressure will act as anode, the one having smaller partial pressure will act as cathode. Please relate to the equation and please relate to the situation. Okay? Now, let us move on to the chlorine electrode. I took one example from non-metals to make you understand the difference. Okay? Now, observe here. Chlorine gas is passed into a solution containing, a solution of potassium chloride where the concentration C1 is given as 0.25 molar. And another electrode, chlorine gas is passed into a solution of KCl containing concentration 0.33 molar. Now I'll ask you a question. Listen to the question, pause the video, try yourself and come back. Two different concentrations are given here. Now please assess and tell me which will act as anode, which will act as cathode. Hope you have tried yourself. Now let me give you my explanation. See, if it is anodic reaction, chloride ions have to participate and lose electrons. Say I take 2 moles of chloride, lose electrons, and chlorine gas has to be liberated. Now, let me call this as, say, C1 for the time being. Now, cathodic reaction will be the chlorine gas gaining 2 electrons and becoming chloride ions, where the concentration will be C2. Now you observe. Let us cancel chlorine gas and electrons on both sides, and you see 2Cl minus with C1 concentration gives rise to 2Cl minus with C2 concentration. Now you write the Nernst equation. E cell is equal to 0.059 by 2 log C1 square, because reactant by product if you take plus, product by reactant if you take minus. So because I am taking plus, C1 square by C2 square. Now tell me, for this ratio to be more than 1, which should be larger? C1 should be larger. And what is the concentration? Where is the concentration is C1? It is at anode. So, in this case, for reaction to be spontaneous, for spontaneity, C1 should be larger than C2. That means anodic concentration should be larger than cathodic concentration. So simple. If it is electropositive elements like metals and hydrogen, cathodic concentration must be larger, anodic concentration must be smaller. But whereas if it is electronegative element like chlorine, bromine, iodine, fluorine, where anions are undergoing oxidation, element is undergoing reduction, what has to happen? Anodic concentration of ion should be larger, cathodic concentration of ion should be smaller. So simple. If it is cationic concentrations, cathodic concentration should be larger. If it is anionic concentration, if it is an anion based electrode, then anodic concentration should be larger. Explained in detail mathematically, physically, as well as based on the reactions. Now, chlorine also is a gas electrode. Now, what if concentrations are constant and pressures are different? P1, P2. Let us see which pressure has to be larger. Observe here. As usual, in anode, Cl minus ion should lose electrons and become chlorine gas, which say has a partial pressure of P1. In cathode, the chlorine gas, which has a partial pressure of say P2, has to gain electrons and become Cl minus. Now let us write the overall reaction. Since chloride ion concentration is constant, let me cancel on both sides. Then you get chlorine gas with partial pressure P2 gives rise to chlorine gas with partial pressure P1. Now, how do I write Nernst equation for this? E cell is equal to 0.059 by 2 log of, I told you, reactant by product, right? So, partial pressure P2 divided by partial pressure P1. Now, for this cell reaction to be spontaneous, for this E cell has to be positive, and according to this equation, for E cell to be positive, P2 should be larger than P1. Now, whose partial pressure we assumed it as P2? Cathodic pressure. Whose partial pressure we assumed it at P1? Anodic partial pressure. Now, that's why for when chlorine electrode is prepared, used to prepare concentration cell with constant concentration of solutions but different partial pressures of gases, then cathodic partial pressure must be larger than the anodic partial pressure. Or the one having larger partial pressure acts as cathode, the one having smaller partial pressure acts as anode. Whereas previously, 2 minutes back when we discussed hydrogen electrode, you noticed that larger partial pressure electrode is acting as anode, smaller partial pressure electrode is acting as cathode. Why? Hydrogen undergoes oxidation. Here, cathodic partial pressure is larger. Why? Because chlorine undergoes reduction. So, observe the differences. Understand the principle. Let me conclude, summarize everything by listening to the video again. There is a half-an-hour video about concentration cells, which I am going to wind up now. Revise everything again. Solve or practice all the 4 examples that I have discussed so far. You will get much better clarity. Okay? Now, let us switch our topic entirely from galvanic cells to, actually we need to go to electrolytic cells. But in between the two, there is one additional concept which is part of syllabus, by the way, called concept of electrolytic conductance. Because you were introduced with electrolytes, you had fair idea of electrolytes last year already. Now, conductance part of electrolytes, properties of electrolytes in terms of their conductance has to be understood, because what do we electrolyze? What is the substance used in an electrolytic cell? Nothing but an electrolyte. So unless we clearly understand the properties of electrolytes, we will not be able to understand electrolytic cells properly. That is why in the middle we have got concept of electrolytic conductance. Let us quickly go through the theoretical aspects of it. Tell me, what is a conductor? Yes, the substance which allows the passage of electricity through it is called a conductor. Come on, pause this video and try to name few conductors in your mind. Now, if you tried that, if you got all like copper, iron, aluminium, gold, silver, etc. or graphite, only these examples are similar to these examples you got, then probably you missed out substances like aqueous hydrochloric acid solution, aqueous potassium chloride solution, aqueous sodium chloride solution, acidulated water, all these are also conductors. Now I gave you two groups of examples if you notice. Same way, let me explain you. There are two types of conductors: electronic conductors and electrolytic conductors. I know we have to do with electrolytic conductors only in this chapter, but before further proceeding to talk in detail about electrolytic conductors, we must differentiate them from electronic conductors very clearly. Why they are called electronic conductors? There is a reason. These substances conduct due to presence of free electrons. So any substance which conducts due to presence of free electrons is called electronic conductor. By the way, for any substance to conduct, there must be charge carriers. Those charge carriers transport the charge from one point to the other. That's why the substance is able to conduct. If there are no charge carriers, no conducting. Such substances are called insulators. We know it well. Now, if the charge carriers are free electrons, you call them electronic conductors. If the charge carriers are free ions, or if the substance is conducting owing to the presence of free ions, then you call it electrolytic conductor. First point to be noted. Then what kind of substances conduct by the virtue of free electrons? The answer is metals and graphite. You know, graphite is one of the allotropes of carbon, and carbon is non-metal. Though it is a non-metal, generally non-metals don't conduct. But though it is a non-metal, in graphite, out of 4 valence electrons of carbon, only 3 are used for bonding, 1 is free. Due to free valence electron for every carbon. So if you take 12 grams of graphite, you have 6.023 into 10 power 23 free electrons in that sample. So many free electrons obviously can move across and conduct. That's why graphite is the non-metallic conductor, but otherwise metals are electronic conductors. So please understand, electronic conductors are otherwise called metallic conductors also, though graphite is an exception. Whereas acids, bases and salts are the electrolytic conductors because they possess free ions. Then in what state? Let us understand clearly. Acids are covalent substances. Most of the bases and all the salts are ionic substances. Now, in ionic substances, the constituent species are already ions. But they are not free, they are packed into lattices, which you will learn in solid state chapter in detail. Now, if that lattice is broken and ions are made free in these two cases, in case of bases and salts, which are ionic substances, if those lattices are broken, the ions which are held due to strong electrostatic forces become free and start conducting. So if they are in their solid state, they don't conduct. I have to make the ions free. What should I do to make the ions free? There are two choices. One, if you want them in their pure state, then melt them, bring to liquid state. When you melt them when you heat them above their melting point, their attraction forces will be broken, ions will become free. So either you can take their molten state, then you will get them in their pure state, but you have to keep the temperature above their melting points. So hot conditions you have to conduct the cell. Or I want it at room temperature only. Then you will not get it in their pure state, but you take them and dissolve in water. Water breaks the ions into independent particles so that ions will be free and start conducting. So, if it is bases and salts, either in their molten state above their melting point are at room temperature as their aqueous solutions. They possess free ions, hence act as electrolytic conductors, not in their solid state. When it comes to acids, they are covalent substances. Heating them makes them simply liquids, doesn't produce ions. For example, there is benzoic acid. Benzoic acid is a solid at room temperature. I heated it strongly above its melting point. What will it become? It becomes benzoic acid liquid, but all the benzoic acid molecules remain covalent molecules only. They don't break into ions. Only when these acids are dissolved in water, they become ions. That's why acids conduct only in their aqueous solutions, whereas bases and salts conduct both in aqueous solutions as well as in their molten state. So, in their aqueous solutions and in their molten states, the acids, bases and salts behave as electrolytic conductors because they conduct due to presence of free ions. Then comes the question, what are the factors that determine the resistance capacity or conductance capacity? You know very well resistance and conductance are reciprocal to each other. So if the resistance is less, conductance will be good. If resistance is more, conductance will be poor. So what decides resistance? If we can understand, you can understand how we can increase the conductance also. And that way, if you see, in case of electronic conductors, resistance is due to kernels. What are kernels? In old PU syllabus, there was a concept called metallic bond, which you don't have according to NCERT syllabus. There is one theory called Lorentz C theory, Lorentz electronic C theory, where Mr. Lorentz says all the metals have very low ionization energies. Because of the low ionization energies, their valence electrons are lost readily. Now, in a metallic lattice where all the metal atoms are packed up, all the valence electrons are lost by the atoms. So, there is a huge sea of electrons in which the rest of the metal atom losing the valence electrons will be left behind, and it will be obviously positively charged after losing electrons. Such positively charged metal atoms, by the way, they are not ions, because we are not saying this metal atom has donated the electrons outside the metal and giving it to somebody else. If the electrons are knocked out of the metal, this is becoming cation, that's a different story. But within the metallic lattice, electrons are present. So rest of the metal atom leaving those valence electrons, which is positively charged, is called kernel. Now please understand, if electrons are supporting the conductance, kernels are supporting the resistance because they are positively charged. So, a resistance of electronic conductors is due to kernels. Moving on, the resistance of electrolytic conductors is explained by more than one factors. The first factor here is solute-solute interactions, which I can even call them as interionic interactions. Means ions are free, that's why it is conducting. But how free they are? If still cation is still able to attract anion or show its influence on anion, then it may slightly hold or control its mobility, its freedom. See, cation is trying to still hold the anion, so anion will not be able to move as fast as it really can, which is called ionic mobility. So if attractions are still stronger, ionic mobility will reduce. As a result, conductance will decrease. That means resistance will increase. So solute-solute interactions will increase the conductance or resistance. So increase the resistance, that means decrease the conductance. Number 2, solvent-solvent interactions. In what form do you talk about solvent-solvent interactions? In terms of viscosity of the solvent. You know, you have studied viscosity both in your physics and also slightly in chemistry. Viscosity refers to attraction force between the layers of liquid. Now if you have a solvent with larger viscosity, then two problems. I'll come to the second problem later. The first main problem is the interaction between solvent particles is stronger. When the interaction between solvent particles is stronger, it will be difficult for the ions to freely move in the solution. So ionic mobility will be reduced by that factor also. So viscosity of the solvent, which is otherwise called solvent-solvent interactions, increases the resistance. Number 3, solute-solvent interactions, which is otherwise called solvation of ions, or you would have studied it as hydration of ions. Last chapter solutions, we could have learnt it. What do you mean by solvation or hydration of ions? I have dissolved a substance which can break into cations or anions. Now, water is a dipole, you know very well. Now, cations are surrounded by water dipoles through their negative ends. Anions are surrounded by water dipoles through their positive ends. That's how, as soon as a substance breaks into ions in the solvent, that is in water generally, the dipoles of the solvent molecules surround the ions through their opposite ends and make it a bulk ion. You understand? Now you understand. Hydration is good actually to separate the ions and keep them independent. That way it is making us behave as conductors. But if that hydration becomes too extensive, then the ion becomes bulk. It will not be able to move faster. So these three factors are reducing the ionic mobility and hence increasing the resistance. So they are helping in the resistance of the electrolytic conductors. Then what is the effect of temperature? Here please understand. Temperature not only increases the movement of electrons, it also increases the velocity or movement of kernels. Because velocity or movement of kernels is increased, the resistance is increased. So resistance is directly proportional to temperature. So obviously conductance is inversely proportional to temperature. Means for electronic conductors, as the temperature increases, conductance decreases or resistance increases. So resistance is directly proportional to temperature. Whereas in case of electrolytic conductors, if you increase the temperature, all the attractions will break. Solute-solute interactions will become lesser. Solvent-solvent interactions also will become lesser. Particles become relatively free because of gaining energy. They become relatively free from each other. So all the interactions become weaker. When the interactions become weaker, ionic mobility increases, resistance decreases, conductance increases. So in case of electronic conductors, resistance is inversely proportional to temperature, conductance is directly proportional to temperature. So quickly, the substances conducting due to free electrons are electronic conductors. Those conducting due to free ions are electrolytic conductors. Metals and graphite act as electronic conductors. Acids in their aqueous solutions, bases and salts in their molten state as well as aqueous solutions behave as electrolytic conductors. Resistance of electronic conductors is due to their kernels, the positively charged metal atoms. Resistance of electrolytic conductors is due to interionic interactions, viscosity of the solvent and solvation of ions. Temperature increases the resistance, decreases the conductance in case of electronic conductors. Temperature decreases the resistance and increases the conductance in case of electrolytic conductors. That is the difference between two types of conductors we have. Now from this point onwards, we have nothing to do with this part. In your physics, and if you are an electronics student already, extensively in your electronics, you will be talking about this category. But rest of this topic, we will be talking about only electrolytic conductors and their properties. After differentiating from electronic conductors, let us know a little more about electrolytic conductors, which can be simply called as electrolytes. How do we define electrolytes? I came back to definition again. More than one ways you can define it. Number one, you can define it as any substance which conducts electricity due to presence of free ions is called electrolyte. Or number 2, any substance that possesses free ions and decomposes when electricity is passed. This is something you have to understand. Mainly electronic conductors. Say you have got copper wire at your home for all the electrical appliances, and you have got aluminium wires in the high extension wires that you have outside. Everywhere, while the electricity is passing, is there any chemical change happening to copper or aluminium or any other metallic conductor? No. So they take electricity without undergoing any change in composition. Whereas electrolyte is a substance which allows the passage of electricity through it and decomposes when electricity is passed. So a substance which undergoes decomposition when electricity is passed is called electrolyte. Or a substance which conducts electricity due to presence of free ions is called electrolyte. Both ways you can understand. So that decomposition caused due to passing of electricity is called electrolysis, and the device in which that electrolysis occurs is called electrolytic cell, which will be our next topic. We are now learning properties of electrolytes in detail. Now, I have already discussed factors affecting conductance of these electrolytes. 4 factors I have already discussed just now while differentiating from electronic conductors. One is solute-solute interactions, which is otherwise called as interionic interactions. Second one is solvent-solvent interactions, which is otherwise called as viscosity. Third one is solute-solvent interaction, which is otherwise called hydration of ions. Fourth one is temperature. These 4 factors I have already discussed. Among them, which are the factors favorable for conductance? Only temperature. These 3 factors are opposing the conductance. They are supporting the resistance, and because of increase in temperature, all these 3 interactions will break, reduce. As a result, ionic mobility increases. We have understood that. Further, factor number 5, very, very important. Strength of electrolyte. You have already studied that there are 2 kinds of electrolytes, weak electrolytes and strong electrolytes. What do you mean by a weak electrolyte? What do you mean by a strong electrolyte? Obviously, you would say an electrolyte which undergoes complete ionization or dissociation. Complete ionization or dissociation in its solutions is called strong electrolyte. The one which undergoes partial ionization or dissociation is called weak electrolyte, you said. Now the question is, what do you mean by complete ionization? What do you mean by partial ionization? Please understand, it is in terms of the number of particles undergoing ionization or dissociation among the ones dissolved. Means, if I dissolve 100 particles in the solution, if all the 100 of them break into ions, then you call it strong electrolyte. Out of 100, 10 have broken into ions. Means 10%. Out of 100, only 1 has broken into ions. Means 1%. Or 2 have broken into ions. Means 2%. Likewise, when less than 100% breaking or dissociation is there, rest of the particles are remaining as undissociated or unionized particles, then you call it weak electrolyte. Now please remember, all the salts are strong electrolytes. Among acids you have weak acids and strong acids. Among bases you have weak bases and strong bases, but salts are all strong electrolytes. Now the question is, how do we assess? What is the mathematical parameter for assessing the strength of electrolyte? Again, you have studied all these things last year in equilibrium chapter, under ionic equilibrium. But it's my duty to revise it to you because there is one review exercise 3.3. I am not solving that. It has 4 questions, out of which 2 are definitions and 2 are working out questions. I am giving you this explanation so that you can answer those questions yourself. So indirectly I am solving review exercise for you here. Concentrate. There is a parameter called degree of ionization or degree of dissociation. By the way, I am using 2 words, ionization and dissociation. What is the difference between the two? Most of you must be knowing. Answer that to yourself. I'll quickly revise it for the benefit of those who do not know it. Let me take 2 examples to explain the difference between ionization and dissociation. Say I have sodium chloride dissolved in water. It becomes aqueous sodium cation and aqueous chloride anion. I have hydrogen chloride dissolved in water. It becomes aqueous H plus ion and aqueous Cl minus ion. Now, what is the difference between production of ions in these 2 cases? That makes the difference between ionization and dissociation. Let me explain that. Sodium chloride is an ionic compound. That means the very constituent particles of the substances are cation and anion. Only thing is they were packed up tightly as a lattice. Because you dissolved in water, the attraction forces are broken and they became independent ions. Started moving freely. They may conduct electricity if you pass it. So understand, here they were already ions, just broken and made independent, that's all. Whereas here, the constituent particles are neutral covalent molecules called HCl molecules. No charges. Because of electronegativity difference, you may assign charges here. That is apparent charge. In oxidation states, what you are assigning here is an apparent charge. But actually, does the hydrogen possess positive charge? No. Does the chlorine possess negative charge? No. HCl is a neutral molecule. After you dissolve in water, the covalent bond between the two is completely delocalizing and shifting to the valence shell of chlorine such that chlorine is turning into chloride ion, hydrogen is turning into H plus ion. So please understand. Here ions were already there, just they were broken. Here ions are generated or produced. That's why this process is called ionization. This process is called dissociation. So please understand, covalent substances ionize in solution if they are producing ions. Ionic substances dissociate in solution if they are producing ions. That is the difference between dissociation and ionization. Now coming back to the mathematical parameter that accounts for the strength of electrolytes. The parameter is alpha. Degree of ionization if it is covalent electrolytes. Degree of dissociation I call it if it is ionic electrolytes. That is equal to number of particles ionized or dissociated divided by total number of particles added to solution. Say I have added 100 particles and all the 100 have ionized or dissociated. Then 100 by 100 will be 1. So for strong electrolytes, the degree of ionization or degree of dissociation will be 1. Whereas for weak electrolytes, always number of particles ionized will be less than the number of particles added to solution. So degree of ionization or degree of dissociation comes less than 1. So weak electrolytes alpha is less than 1, strong electrolytes alpha is more than 1. Then the last but important factor which I write here, concentration of solution. What should it do to conductance? To understand that, I can explain you what does it do to the strength of the electrolyte. See, there is one law called Ostwald's dilution law. By the way, it is only for weak electrolytes because Whatever may be the concentration, strong electrolytes would already ionize 100% and conduct using all the ions present in them. Whereas weak electrolytes, they ionize only to some extent, right? Now Ostwald's dilution law is mathematically given as alpha is equal to square root of K by C, where K is called ionization constant, C is called concentration. Now as per this mathematical relation, you can understand as concentration of a weak electrolytic solution decreases, degree of its ionization increases. And Ostwald's dilution law states that as the concentration of a weak electrolyte solution approaches 0, alpha approaches 1. What is the maximum value of alpha possible? 1, right? Now as the concentration approaches 0, alpha approaches 1. Means as the concentration reaches its lowest value, alpha reaches its highest value. So weak electrolytes, as you keep diluting it, as you keep reducing the concentration, its degree of ionization increases, so it starts conducting better. That is the sixth factor. Okay, so these three factors are opposing the conductance. Temperature is supporting the conductance for electrolytic solutions. Now, strong electrolytes conduct better than weak electrolytes. Then, among weak electrolytes, the one which is having lower concentration conduct better than the ones having higher concentration. These are the factors affecting electrolytic conductance. Let us now move on to the properties of electrolytic conductors. See, like for electronic conductors, electrolytic conductors also Ohm's law holds good. And what does Ohm's law say? The potential difference across a conductor is directly proportional to the current passed through it. To remove proportionality, we introduce a constant called R, where R means the resistance. So, Ohm's law holds good for electrolytic conductors also. So, for electrolytic conductors also, potential difference across an electrolytic conductor is directly proportional to the current passed through it. So, resistance of an electrolytic conductor in terms of voltage and current can be expressed as V by I. So the first property we are discussing is resistance of an electrolytic conductor, denoted by R generally. Theoretically, what is resistance? Obstruction caused to the flow of current. Or obstruction caused to the flow of electricity is called resistance, and I have already explained you just now why this obstruction is caused, due to what kind of interactions. Now, see, the resistance will be directly proportional to the length of the conductor and inversely proportional to the area of cross section of the conductor. Resistance of a conductor is directly proportional to the length of the conductor and inversely proportional to the area of cross section of the conductor. And this ratio L by A is otherwise called as cell constant, denoted by G star actually, and is named as cell constant in case of electrolytic conductors. Why is it called cell constant? I will tell you a little later, but for the time being, please understand the ratio L by A is called cell constant, length of electrolytic conductor to the area of cross section of electrolytic conductor. Now, to remove proportionality, we have to introduce a constant, and the constant introduced in this case is given by the symbol rho, where rho means resistivity. Previously, they used to call it specific resistance. So, even if few books are still using the word specific resistance, don't confuse, both mean the same. Rho is resistivity or specific resistance. We will determine rho a little later, but before that, the units of resistance are ohms, either given by the symbol omega or simply written ohm, OHM. In terms of basic SI units, how could you express it? Voltage or potential difference is given by the unit volt, and current is given by the unit ampere, so you can say volt per ampere. Now, there are some interesting questions to be asked now. Question number 1. I just now said resistance is proportional to length of the ratio of directly proportional to the length of the conductor and inversely proportional to area of cross section of the electrolytic conductor. Now I have a question. See, if you have to calculate resistance in terms of length and area of cross section, if these two are given and the resistivity is given, to use this formula you need length and area of cross section, right? If it were a metallic conductor like copper wire or aluminum wire or silver rod, talking about its length and area of cross section has a sense. But what are electrolytic conductors? Either molten base or molten salt or aqueous solution of base or aqueous solution of salt or aqueous solution of an acid. It's a liquid. Then what do you mean by the length of a liquid? What do you mean by the area of cross section of a liquid? Question number 1. Second important question here is, just now we discussed that electrolyte is a substance which undergoes decomposition when you pass electricity. Now if I am trying to determine a property like resistance practically, if I pass electricity, if it is decomposing, it is changing the very chemical nature, its chemical nature by decomposing, then how do I determine its resistance? Question number 2. Number 3, like if I have to connect it to a circuit, like a metallic wire, how do I connect a liquid? Number 1, what do you mean by length and area of cross section for a liquid? Number 2, it is undergoing decomposition if you pass electricity, then how do you determine these properties experimentally? Number 3, how do you connect it like a metallic wire if you have to connect it to a circuit? How do you connect it because it is a liquid? One answer for all these 3 questions is conductivity cell. See, conductivity cell is a small device which is a long glass tube made of Pyrex glass, either horizontally designed or vertically designed. A long glass tube made of Pyrex glass to the walls of which electrodes are connected or in which electrodes are placed. These electrodes are platinum electrodes on the surface of which platinum powder is coated. Platinum electrodes, in order not to interfere or react with the solution present inside, and then platinum powder is to increase the surface area of the electrode so that the conductivity will be better. Now there will be provision for filling the electrolytic solution if it is horizontal like this. If it is vertical like this, you can easily fill in the electrolytic solution. So please understand, the electrolytic solution is placed in this conductivity cell and then its resistance, conductance, conductivity, resistivity, any property is determined. Now these platinum electrodes are connected through a metallic wire and that metallic wire will be connected to the circuit. So your third question is answered. Now the second question, it decomposes when electricity is passed, so what are we doing? If direct current is passed, it decomposes. So during determination of electrolytic properties, properties of electrolytic conductors, we use alternating current AC, not direct current DC. Second question being answered. Now third question, first question, what do you mean by length and area of cross section? Simple. The distance between the 2 electrodes in the conductivity cell is taken as length. So you fill in the hole, but only that amount of electrolyte which is present between the electrodes is under the influence of electricity, right? That's why the length of the gap between the 2 electrodes in the conductivity cell is taken as the length, and the area of cross section of the electrode, platinum electrode used here, is taken as the area of cross section of the electrolyte. So please understand, these are the dimensions of the conductivity cell in which the liquid called electrolyte is poured, that is considered under L and A. Now I can answer you, why did we call the ratio L by A as the cell constant? The answer is simple. The ratio L by A is called cell constant because I take 100 solutions and determine their resistance or conductance or conductivity or resistivity by using the same conductivity cell, then the dimensions don't change, right? So the ratio L by A depends upon the conductivity cell which we are taking. So for a given conductivity cell, this ratio is constant. That's why the word cell constant often symbolized as G star. So I can even say that resistance is equal to rho into G star. Okay, that is about resistance and that is about the conductivity cell used for determining properties of electrolytic conductance. Let us move on to remaining properties of electrolytic conductors. Second property is resistivity rho. Just now we introduced resistivity as the proportionality constant while getting relation between resistance and cell constant. From that relation only we can understand the definition of resistivity. See, just now I was writing that resistance is equal to rho into L by A. Therefore, resistivity rho is equal to resistance into A by L. This is the formula basically. Resistance into A by L. Now, how do we define rho? Assume A is 1 centimeter square or 1 meter square. If you take SI unit, CGS units, 1 centimeter square. If you take SI units, 1 meter square. So if you assume area of cross section as 1 centimeter square or 1 meter square and length as 1 centimeter or 1 meter, then cell constant will be 1, then resistance equal to resistivity. Accordingly, you can define resistivity as resistance exhibited by a solution of unit length and unit area of cross section. Or I can say when area is centimeter square and length is centimeter, 1 centimeter and 1 centimeter square, if you take the volume, it will be 1 centimeter cube. That means unit volume. So simple. Resistance of unit volume of an electrolytic solution. Resistance of unit volume of an electrolytic solution. That means in CGS units, resistance of 1 centimeter cube of a solution. In SI units, resistance of exactly 1 meter cube of a solution is called resistivity. Previously was called specific resistance. Let us go for the units of resistivity. See, resistance is ohms into area of cross section is centimeter square divided by length is centimeter. Centimeter square gets cancelled. So you get ohm into centimeter if it is CGS units, ohm into meter if it is SI units, depending upon what units you are using for area of cross section and length. So ohm centimeter or ohm meter are the units of resistivity. That is the second property, resistivity. Let us move on to the third property, conductance, denoted by G. The ease with which electricity flows through an electrolyte is called conductance of that electrolyte. So obstruction caused is resistance, ease of flow is conductance. That's why conductance is just reciprocal of resistance. Now we have understood that resistance is directly proportional to cell constant, that is resistance is proportional to L by A. That's why conductance will be proportional to A by L. That means conductance is inversely proportional to cell constant. So I can write G is proportional to 1 by G star because cell constant is nothing but G star. Now to remove this proportionality, we introduce a constant called kappa. We introduce a property called kappa. So conductance is equal to kappa into A by L, where kappa is called, it's a Greek letter, kappa is called conductivity, previously called as specific conductance. Books use either words. So kappa is conductivity or specific conductance. So ease with which electricity flows through an electrolytic conductor is called conductance, and it is reciprocal of resistance 1 by R. Therefore, it is proportional to A by L, that is inversely proportional to cell constant. So to remove proportionality, we have used kappa. Kappa is conductivity. Now, what are the units of conductance? We will go to conductivity later. What are the units of conductance? See here, it is reciprocal of resistance, that's why it can be simply called ohm inverse. But ohm inverse has got a special unit called Siemens, which is denoted by capital S. So, units of conductance are either ohm inverse or Siemens, or sometimes people write mho. It is reciprocal of resistance, right? Resistance units are ohm, right? That's why it is given as reverse mho. So either ohm inverse or mho or Siemens, all are the units of conductance. Now, what is this conductivity, which is denoted by kappa? To understand it, let us take up this relation only and get the expression for kappa. Kappa is equal to, I can say, G into L by A, and you know L by A is nothing but cell constant, so you can write G into G star. Now, as you can clearly see from this relation, and get the definition of conductivity from this relation. Assume length is 1 centimeter and area of cross section is 1 centimeter square, as we just did. Then the volume of the solution is going to be 1 centimeter cube. So simply, so that will be L by A becomes 1. So kappa becomes equal to conductance. So you can say conductance exhibited by unit volume of an electrolytic solution. Conductance exhibited by unit volume of an electrolytic solution is called conductivity or specific conductance, kappa. Unit volume means if it is CGS units 1 centimeter cube, if it is SI units 1 meter cube. So exactly 1 centimeter cube of an electrolytic solution exhibits how much conductance. Exactly 1 meter cube of an electrolytic solution exhibits how much conductance can be called as kappa. Now how do you arrive at the units? Conductance is Siemens, length is centimeter, area of cross section is centimeter square. If you simplify, Siemens centimeter inverse if it is CGS units, Siemens meter inverse if it is SI units. So the conductance exhibited by unit volume of an electrolytic solution is called kappa, conductivity or specific conductance, and its units are Siemens centimeter inverse or Siemens meter inverse from the formula. Okay. Now if you notice, all these four properties I discussed so far, resistance, resistivity, conductance, conductivity, are properties which can be expressed for both electronic conductors and electrolytic conductors. Only difference is, in case of electronic conductors, the ratio L by A is simply ratio of length and area of cross section of that metal, metallic wire, metallic rod, whatever it may be. Whereas in case of electrolytic conductors, it is the length and area of gap between the electrodes and area of cross section of electrodes in a conductivity cell. That is the only difference. Otherwise, all these four properties are same for both electrolytic and electronic conductors. Next, I am going to discuss a property which is exclusive and specific to electrolytic conductors, and more importantly, more appropriately, more in detail talks about the behavior of electrolytic conductors, that is molar conductance. Let us understand molar conductance. So, one of the most important properties of electrolytic conductors is molar conductance, denoted by lambda m, lambda subscript m. How do you define molar conductance? And all the mathematical expressions and rest of the understanding of molar conductance comes only from the definition. So we have to understand definition of molar conductance clearly. Now let us make simple. See, definitions look very lengthy and complicated if you look into the books. But if you start understanding from simplest, it becomes easy. Please believe me, science is simple. Simple thinking, great achievements is the elixir of science. So simply if you think, as the title indicates, and I have already told you, go by nomenclature, science becomes easy. Molar conductance. Conductance of 1 mole of an electrolyte. Simple, that's all. Conductance of 1 mole of an electrolyte. Now please understand. The quantity of electrolyte must be 1 molar. Say for example it is sodium chloride. It must be 58.5 grams exactly. Say for example hydrogen chloride. It must be 36.5 grams exactly. Say sulfuric acid. It must be 98 grams exactly. Likewise, all the ions produced by 1 mole of an electrolyte is able to conduct how much? Is able to show how much conductance is called molar conductance. Simple. Now a little addition to that is, now that electrolyte is not simply conducting, right? It is conducting in its solution, right? Now, in what volume of solution you have dissolved it? Say you have dissolved it in V centimeter cube of solution. So, in given volume of solution, all the ions that are produced by 1 mole of an electrolyte in given volume of solution placed between the two electrodes which are unit distance apart. So, here conditions are, quantity of electrolyte must be exactly 1 mole in any volume of solution, but the electrolytes distance between the two electrodes must be exactly unit distance, 1 centimeter if it is a small cell, 1 meter if it is a large conductivity cell. Okay, so let me write conductance exhibited by all the ions produced by 1 mole of an electrolyte in given volume of solution placed between electrodes which are unit distance apart. Electrodes which are unit distance apart. Now after you understood this definition, in order to get the mathematical expression for lambda m, molar conductance, I should make some assumptions. So let us say 1 mole of electrolyte is dissolved in V centimeter cube of a solution, let us say. 1 mole of electrolyte was dissolved in V centimeter cube of a solution, let us say. Now, the conductance exhibited by this 1 mole of an electrolyte in this V centimeter cube of a solution is called molar conductance, right? That's why I can say lambda m is equal to conductance of V centimeter cube of solution. Therefore, conductance of V centimeter cube is equal to lambda m. Then, what is conductance of 1 centimeter cube of this solution? V centimeter cube is exhibiting lambda m. Then 1 centimeter cube must be exhibiting lambda m by V, right? Good. Now, just now we understood that conductance of unit volume is nothing but kappa, conductivity or specific conductance. Therefore, I can write kappa is equal to conductance of 1 centimeter cube is lambda m by V, we have established. So, kappa is equal to lambda m by V, or lambda m is equal to kappa into V, where V represents the volume of the solution or V represents the dilution in the solution, because more the dilution, more the volume of solution, right? So, lambda m is equal to kappa into volume. Simple. Lambda m is equal to kappa into volume. Now you know very well. If I have to express it in terms of concentration of solution, you know very well concentration is inversely proportional to dilution. So if lambda m is directly proportional to dilution, lambda m must be inversely proportional to concentration. Generally, concentration is expressed in molarity. For most of the purposes, the concentration term used is molarity. So I can write lambda m is equal to kappa by molarity. Because it is kappa into volume and because molarity is inversely proportional to volume, lambda m or molar conductance is equal to kappa by molarity. Now there is a problem. If, see, kappa is expressed either in Siemens per centimeter or Siemens per meter. Centimeter is the CGS unit, meter is the SI unit. Whereas molarity is moles per liter, which is decimeter cube. So in denominator you will have either centimeter or meter. In the numerator you have either centimeter or meter. In the denominator you are having decimeter cube. So you will have to convert decimeter cube into either centimeter cube if it is CGS units or meter cube in SI units. Instead of every time when you are solving this problem trying to convert decimeter cube into meter cube or decimeter cube into centimeter cube, we will keep it converted right now so that our value will be, the value of molarity should be in decimeter cube or centimeter cube only. It must be in centimeter cube or meter cube only. So we are going to derive two formulae for lambda m, one for CGS units in terms of centimeter cube, other for SI units in terms of meter cube. Otherwise, the basic formula you need to remember is lambda m is equal to kappa by m. So lambda m is equal to kappa by m. Now say CGS units. Kappa is given in Siemens centimeter inverse. Now molarity, capital M, molarity is given in moles per decimeter cube or liter, you know that. Now you know very well 1 decimeter cube is equal to 1000 centimeter cube. Or 1 liter is equal to 1000 milliliters. Now, molarity is given to me in moles per liter, that is decimeter cube, but I want the value here in centimeter cube. That's why 1 decimeter cube is 1000 centimeter cube. So in the place of decimeter cube, I must place 1000 centimeter cube, right? So let me write lambda m is equal to kappa by molarity in moles per 1000 centimeter cube I am writing. Kappa is already in Siemens meter inverse, Siemens centimeter inverse. Now I am taking mole per 1000 centimeter cube. Now units will become simpler to cancel. 1000 is in the denominator of the denominator, so it goes to numerator. So kappa into 1000 by molarity. So in case of lambda m has to be expressed in CGS units, it is going to be kappa into 1000 by molarity. And what will be the units? See here, Siemens centimeter inverse. Now centimeter cube inverse it will become. So you will be left with centimeter square here. So centimeter square inverse it is going to be. So Siemens mole inverse centimeter square inverse. Centimeter square. So the units of molar conductance in CGS units will be Siemens mole inverse centimeter square. Okay. What if it is expressed in SI units? If it is expressed in SI units, actually decimeter cube is equal to 1 meter cube is equal to 1000 decimeter cube. That means decimeter cube is equal to 1 by 1000 centimeter cube. So what happens? Here you will have 1000 decimeter cube divided by 1000. So 1000 remains in the numerator. So in case of SI units, lambda m is equal to kappa divided by m into 1000. And units are going to be Siemens mole inverse meter square. So what you need to understand is molar conductance basic formula is lambda m is equal to kappa by m. You know molarity is generally given in moles per decimeter cube, that is moles per liter. You need to convert it into centimeter cube or meter cube based on the units given, units of kappa given. That's why you know 1 decimeter cube is equal to 1000 centimeter cube. Placing it here, 1000 comes to the numerator. So in CGS units, kappa into 1000 by m. Whereas if it is in meter cube, then decimeter cube is equal to 1 by 1000 meter cube. So in the denominator, you are going to take decimeter cube by 1000. Denominator of the denominator. So 1000 comes to the denominator only. So lambda m is equal to kappa by molarity into 1000. Units I have mentioned. Now you have got another property called equivalent conductance, on which I am not spending much time. Lambda equivalent they call it. I am not spending much time except saying that if molar conductance is the conductance of 1 mole of electrolyte, equivalent conductance is the conductance of 1 equivalent of electrolyte, which you have already learnt in the first chapter of first year. Now, number of moles per liter is expressed as molarity. Number of equivalents per liter is expressed as, I know you remember, it is normality. So, lambda m becomes kappa by normality, and as usual if it is CGS units, lambda m is kappa into 1000 by normality. If it is SI units, lambda equivalent. If it is SI units, lambda equivalent will be kappa by normality into 1000. I am a little absent-minded. I will be, messing with words. I will be talking one for the other. Bear with me. So lambda equivalent is equal to kappa by normality, not molarity. So lambda equivalent is equal to kappa into 1000 by normality if it is CGS units. Lambda equivalent is equal to kappa by normality into 1000 if it is SI units. Okay, that is about molar conductance and equivalent conductance. Most important properties to be discussed for electrolytic conductors. So we have learned 6 properties totally. Let us quickly list them out for our easy learning and convenience. First one was resistance, denoted by R. Its formula is R is equal to rho into L by A and units are ohms. Second one is resistivity, denoted by rho. Its formula is rho is equal to R into A by L and units are ohm centimeter inverse or ohm meter inverse. I'm sorry, A by L, right? Ohms into centimeter or ohm into meter. Good. Number 3, conductance, denoted by G. So G is equal to kappa into L by A and units are Siemens or ohm inverse or mho. Then fourth one is conductivity, denoted by kappa. Kappa is equal to 1 by R into L by A. See, I have messed up here also. I keep doing that. Kappa into A by L, Siemens, ohm inverse or mho. Back to conductivity, kappa 1 by R into L by A or conductance into L by A. Siemens centimeter inverse or Siemens meter inverse are the units. Fifth one, molar conductance, lambda m, and for this 2 formulae we will get. One is in CGS units, lambda m is equal to kappa into 1000 by molarity. One is in SI units, lambda m is equal to kappa by molarity into 1000. Units will be Siemens mole inverse centimeter square or Siemens mole inverse meter square. Now there is sixth one, equivalent conductivity, where you replace by molarity by normality and you replace mole inverse by gram equivalent inverse, because it is conductance exhibited by 1 mole of electrolyte. This is conductance exhibited by 1 equivalent of electrolyte. Okay. So children, so far in this session we have understood concentration cells in detail with 4 different examples and have understood all the cases of concentration cells. Then I introduced you the electrolytic conductors, differentiated them from conventional electronic conductors. Then we understood all the factors that affect the properties of affect the conductance of electrolytes. Then we have understood the definition, formulae and units of 6 different properties of electrolytic conductors. Now you have got immediately a learning exercise, an entrance corner and home exercise based on all these 6 properties. Now I am leaving all of them as homework for you. Sir, why are you not solving them? Please understand, when you solve them you will only understand all of them are based on direct substitution. There is nothing difficult, there is nothing logical, there is nothing ununderstandable there. That's why go back. Soon after these 6 properties you have a learning exercise containing 3 questions if I am not wrong. You have an entrance corner containing 6 questions and you have a home exercise containing 9 questions. 9 plus 6 plus 3 totally 18 questions. All these 18 questions I am leaving it to your discretion to solve for homework. Take 1 or 2 days. After 2 days we will post the solutions of all these 3 exercises in your group. Go through the solutions, compare them. If you are unable to understand the solution also, post it to me. I'll explain it to you in a separate small video bites. Okay, so we have finished up to properties of electrolytic conductors. There is one more concept which might take 45 minutes to 1 hour in the next session to understand the properties of electrolytic conductors completely. Finishing that, we will be switching to electrolysis or electrolytic cell. So sincerely do those 3 exercises. Save a little time for me so that I can focus on more complicated concepts coming next. Thank you.